All right, everyone, I'm going to get started. Thanks for coming. So today we're talking about the very spooky topic of evil twins. And as you'll learn as I do the talk, there are people in your organization right now who are using digital twins, and they're doing it in a way that doesn't make any sense, that's going to lead to really terrible decisions and terrible outcomes. So we're going to talk about what I mean by that, what the difference between a digital twin and synthetic data is, why I'm talking about this topic at all, and then I'm going to give you some tips that are going to be helpful regardless of what platform or vendor you work with to make sure that you, in your own organizations, can avoid evil twins. So just really quickly, this is Panoplai. This is the company that I'm representing, where I lead strategy. We are end-to-end market research platform, but we also ingest data from any source, and on top of that data, build particularly beautiful digital twins that can simulate any consumer or audience segment that you want to understand, where you can get instant feedback from those people in real time. We're a little different from other companies out there, and then this is kind of the last thing I'll say about Panoplai in general, so it doesn't feel like an advertisement. We believe really strongly in not black boxing AI personas. We believe really strongly in combining quantitative and qualitative analysis. And we believe really strongly in putting the keys in the hands of researchers and insights professionals and marketers and innovators to actually build the digital twins in collaboration with us or on their own that they want to converse with. And I'll talk in a little bit later about exactly what that means. Oops. Yeah, so that's me. And actually, by background, I'm an anthropologist of innovation and technology. And so one area that I'm particularly interested in is beyond the platform, beyond the tech itself. What does it look like when an organization adopts a digital twin successfully? How does process change? How does communication change? What's the relationship between research and innovation or research and marketing? How do those things change? Because it's not as simple as simply investing in technology to use generative AI properly in a way that makes sense, in a way that's tested and vetted, where you're controlling for the risks and really trying to achieve ROI. So why am I talking about digital twins anyway? So let's start with a jet engine. Why am I starting with a jet engine? It's because the concept of digital twin really comes from the world of stuff. And the idea early on was, can we model a thing, a physical thing that's really complex, that exists in the real world, like a jet engine, and can we bring it over into virtual world and then learn how it works better, train people to use it better, spot obstacles or spot problems that might emerge more effectively. And according to a recent McKinsey study, something like 70% of the Fortune 500 has already invested in physical digital twins in order to train their people or in order to model different kinds of scenarios around the physical world. What's happening now, which is really cool, is that whole idea is traveling over to the world of human decision-making and human interaction and human communication, the world that we care about, right? The nice thing is that the same principle applies, that if the model's bad, if the underlying training data is bad, then the outputs are terrible, right? You get an evil twin that'll give you bad advice about what to do. But if the training data is good, if the way we've understood the world is correct, and if the model is good, then digital twins can be incredibly powerful ways to get real-time feedback about almost everything that you're doing inside a company. So this is a definition that I like to share, that a digital twin is a dynamic, data-driven virtual extension of precisely targeted audiences or customer segments. So you can kind of imagine the world's most representative focus group, available 24/7 for real-time feedback about innovation, marketing, or anything else. Except then imagine that you take that focus group, you put them in a room, you lock the door, and you never let them leave, and they just give you really awesome feedback whenever you want it for free, right? That's the beauty of a digital twin. And there are no human rights violations associated with digital twins, so you can breathe freely. So the vision of a lot of our clients, and we've done this a lot over the last couple years, 2 to 3 years with big enterprise clients, with consultancies, with ad agencies. I'm going to talk about a few real case studies and share real data in a minute. So what do they want to do with the digital twins? Well, they want to understand customers, of course. They want to shape commercial strategy and innovation outcomes. They want to develop more nuanced, predictive, actionable insights. And they want to develop better products, right? Accelerate the path to commercialization of better innovations. And we've done all those things with a pretty wide range of clients, both B2C and B2B. And the good news for all of you out there, at least in terms of our interpretation of digital twins, is that they don't work without really good quality underlying data that's relevant to the challenge at hand. That is, we do not and will never see a digital twin as an alternative to real research. That's not the game we're in, right? It's a way to add value to every dollar that's spent on real research with real people, that's rigorous, that includes all of the safeguards and brilliant techniques that you've all developed over the years. It's like, what do we build on top of that to bring it to life and to allow it to do more work for clients? The question is not how do we get rid of research and get rid of the insights function so that we can just talk to virtual people. In fact, it's almost the opposite. And this is sort of what I was saying in the beginning. By 2026, the majority of brands will have piloted digital twins, including when it comes to marketing and research. My contention is that most of them will be evil. What do I mean by that? They'll be shadow IT, right? How many of you, be honest, have asked ChatGPT, okay, pretend I'm a 20-year-old who likes to chew gum. Do you like this advertisement? Or write this thing in the voice of, I don't know, Taylor Swift, right? Every time you're doing that, you're giving life to a bad digital twin. Why bad? Because you're getting generic advice that's not particularly concrete that anyone else could get, and it's not clear how that advice is representative or accurate or tied to any kind of meaningful underlying segmentation or persona. Now, imagine that you work for a research company or a brand. Your colleagues are doing that all the time, testing stuff against random ChatGPT prompts. That's not a good idea. It's okay as a way to ideate, but it's not a good way to make strategic decisions. So what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that is methodically, with a partner or not, build digital twins that are carefully constructed, that have relevant, powerful, representative training data that give them a solid foundation. So our approach to digital twin building is slightly different. You can think about digital twins is kind of falling in two buckets, right? Bucket one is like, we're going to use the large language model and all of its attendant training data, all the stuff that people said on Instagram or the stuff that people said on Reddit. By the way, we're not quite sure who said that stuff. That's the foundation. Choice number two is what we do, which is it takes a little longer, it's a little more expensive, but the outputs are far more accurate. And that is maybe a foundation of survey data. Maybe we're layering in some social data, some qual transcripts. Maybe we're layering in some PowerPoint decks or PDFs about a segmentation or a way of viewing the world. That is, we're capturing the value that you've already sunk into your understanding of the market. And then we're building on top of that. And it's much more reliable, as I'll show you in a moment. So just a few ultra quick case studies. We did a thing with Kraft Heinz that we presented about, and what we did was ingest a whole bunch of shopper data from many previous years to provide context. Then we launched a study about a bunch of different grocery categories, including peanut butter. We discovered that our client's contention is that Canadian peanut butter is far superior to American peanut butter. I don't know if that's true or not. You can test on your own. And what we wanted to do is to bring to life different segments of shoppers. When they go to the store, what are their expectations? What are their disappointments? And then how do we test new product innovations, shelf layout, in-store marketing, relationship between mental and physical availability against those nuanced personas? And by the way, those personas are not just like demographic characteristics, like age groups, gender, region, income, whatever. They're attitudinal as well, because we know how these people think and speak and use language to describe shopping. I'll give you another one that's a favorite of mine. HubSpot is a longstanding client of ours, and senior executives in HubSpot wanted to create a much better understanding of what they call growth Gabby, which is, we all have these personas, right? like an ideal buying persona, a customer that they call Growth Gabby, who's like an innovation forward buyer of HubSpot who maybe is like super annoyed by Salesforce because it's so like bloated and bureaucratic, and they see themselves as like a HubSpot customer for life. So who are they, right? What are their attitudes? What are the consumer brands they like? How do they think about technology, about risk, about their career? We help them figure that stuff out with our survey platform. You know, a lot of you have done that kind of work before. But then the people in the C-suite actually came to us with a challenge, which was, we don't want to report about Growth Gabby. We want you to actually bring Growth Gabby to life so that we can talk with her every time we have an interesting idea. So when the CEO or anyone else gets up in the middle of the night and says like, oh my God, what if we tried this product innovation? What if we implemented this new AI solution? What if we tried this new tagline? She can get directionally accurate feedback from their core customer or any subsegment of their core customer base instantly. That's the power of this kind of approach. I'll give you another one. So one of the world's biggest alcohol holding companies that owns a bunch of the brands that you all either enjoy or think are just okay. They wanted to dramatically accelerate innovation around canned cocktails. They were annoyed that canned cocktails are a growing space, but they didn't have much market share there. They didn't have a hot canned cocktail brand. So we created a kind of 3-stage innovation process where we scouted for white space, adjacencies, new ideas from places like Japan, actually, where canned cocktails are more of a thing. And then we worked together to test those ideas. And now we're going to work together to commercialize them successfully. Now, we're still doing real research, but whereas in the past, maybe we did like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 waves of real research, we're talking about a 1 to 2 year innovation commercialization cycle. Now we're accelerating things dramatically, we're reducing costs dramatically, and even more importantly, we're democratizing access to this data and to these digital twins. So it's not the case that only one person in the company is like taking orders for a report, then delivering the report. It's now the case that there's this digital twin that's governed by, right, that's tested, that's vetted by the insights team, but then handed over to the marketers and to the product innovation people so that in the flow of their work on a day-to-day basis, they're getting useful, actionable feedback. All right, so now I'm going to show you really quickly data from like a real pilot that we just finished that's going to be converting to an enterprise deal. It's with a Fortune 500 company in the food and beverage space. And obviously, for obvious reasons, I have to disguise everything about it, aside from the testing numbers. So a lot of people ask, like, I mean, the first thing any reasonable, sane person asks is, like, how can I trust the digital twins? How do I know that you're not selling me an evil twin? How do I know that this is actually a good twin that's going to give me good advice, right? I can't just take your word for it. Like, my job's at stake, a ton of money's at stake, investment's at stake. And what I say is, you don't have to take our word for it because we believe that there's not one way to quantify the accuracy of digital twins, a single number that will hold across all situations. Instead, when we work with you on a pilot, let's actually build in a testing and learning plan where we're doing parallel testing. And we're looking at the variance between the outputs of the real people, their opinions, ideas, et cetera, and those from the digital twins. And this is real data, right? So just to give you a sense, we were at about 91% accuracy with not all that much underlying data that we ingested from the client and studies that we ran for the client, like a few studies, a few PowerPoints, et cetera. We were able to simulate these people. We were able to allow the client to converse with the people. And we were able to test meaningfully ideas both in visual form and in text-based form to determine how real people would respond to them, but instantly. And then we tested all of that against a representative sample of real people out in the world that we recruited for the client and sent surveys to. So you can see here that almost all of the quant questions outperformed the client's expectations. And just a word of caution here. What I'm talking about is a little bit different from synthetic data, right? When we talk about synthetic data, quite often we have as our frame of reference one survey. And the question is, can we replace a certain percentage of the respondents with fake respondents, right? In order to decrease the cost of the survey or increase the speed. We're talking about something very different where, yeah, accuracy matters, but we're thinking about accuracy across an entire research process that lends itself to value right away, right? And to us, accuracy is like the price you pay for the ticket to the value game, right? But the value game's the real game. It's like, how are we helping our clients come up with better innovations more quickly for less money that are going to have a higher win percentage? But in order to do that, we have to be accurate. But what does accuracy mean? Well, it's easy with quant data, but what do you do with qual data, right? When you have a digital twin that's pretending to be a person and saying stuff using language, what does it mean to say that the outputs are like statistically accurate distribution? Well, you can try to evaluate the content of what's said, but our client really cared about how these people were talking. And in fact, in this case, we were looking at teen consumers of food and beverage, mostly in Europe, right? So digital twin has to sound like teens in a meaningful way in order to spur the kind of thinking, collaboration, innovation that the client wanted. So we have what I think is an industry-leading report card where we score ourselves. It's like very little grade inflation, like only a B+. We score ourselves pretty hard on the outputs, and we're looking at the quantitative outputs, of course, that's the 91+%, but also the qualitative outputs, and we're evaluating based on the themes that are generated, the types of themes, prioritization of themes, the comment syntax, and the theme resonance. And what we told the client was, see that C at the bottom? That's because we don't have enough underlying training data that mimics the way teens talk about this particular category. And we're going to get better at that over time. And the last thing I'll say about all this is a lot of people ask a really good question, which is like, what about the outliers? What about those early trends that we want to pick up on before the competition? Doesn't AI just kind of revert to least common denominator, give you the heart of the bell curve, smooth out differences, get rid of human individuality? And my answer to that is it tends to. But just because it tends to doesn't mean you can't fix that problem. And you fix it at the input stage. It's better training data that includes some of that outlier stuff, good qual transcripts, et cetera. You fix it with a better model. And then you fix it with better interactions with the data, better prompts, better ways of thinking, better ways of modeling the interaction between these digital twins and a human team. So we're full steam ahead helping these companies, these clients, achieve real breakthrough innovation with digital twins, but not without an enormous amount of tinkering and testing that's general to us, that's internal to us, but that's also specific to every client. And I just wanted to give you all a little bit of a window into the client version of that. All right, so lessons for digital twin adoption. And I have no idea what time it is. Okay, that's good. I'll try to go quickly and then leave time for questions and conversation. So number one is refuse trade-offs. Do not accept that digital twins mean that you don't need to do real research. You may need to do less of it or different kinds of real research, but that real research is the fuel that powers the engine of the digital twin to work effectively. And if somebody comes to you and says, oh, you're selling to investment bankers, no problem at all. We have like pre-baked AI personas, and one of them can pretend to be an investment banker. My advice is run the other direction, because it's not going to be very good quality data, and the outputs are not going to be unique to you, have anything to do with your business challenges, and you shouldn't base any decisions on them. Number two is data quality is everything, right? So avoid the shortcuts. Longitudinal, high-quality data from multiple sources is the way to go. Our platform's cool because you can ingest data from surveys that we've run, that other people are running, Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, whatever. You can also ingest social data and even transaction data. And that's a very cool possibility, because then you're building a digital twin not only on opinion data, but you're looking at the relationship between behavior and purchase history and opinion data to build that digital twin. Keep humans in the loop. What do I mean by that? I mean, this kind of like all or nothing AI or people, debate is sort of ridiculous. The point is, let's build a human technical process that constructs very deliberately moments of friction for humans to apply judgment. So with this particular client that I showed you the testing data from, they're actually thinking about moments in this kind of research process where a particular kind of cross-functional human team will just basically say, like, stop, let's see if this makes any sense. Let's apply our human judgment to these kinds of questions. And then let's use this platform as precisely a platform to stand on in order to make leaps of human judgment and creativity. And let's think about the best way to do that. Start small, launch an MVP, and I can tell you right now, if you're a brand and you don't have one, your competitors do. They have a digital twin MVP now, and it's going to give them durable competitive advantage, and the head start that they have on you will be difficult to overcome in terms of the quality of the insights that they're going to be generating. If you're an MR company, think about ways that you can become expert about this stuff quickly, hopefully by getting your hands dirty, trying it, doing a pilot with us or somebody else, or at least trying to do something that's a little bit more DIY. Capture the edge cases. So we talked about this a minute ago. AI can tend to the heart of the bell curve, the normal stuff, the boring stuff, the average stuff. Make sure that the inputs, the model, and the way you're engaging with the data is calibrated, all of that properly, to capture those edge cases, to really drive innovation, to drive those creative, difference-making marketing ideas. Gain buy-in, of course. I think for this, more than anything else, that we all say, like, we're insights professionals, we want a seat at the strategic table, et cetera, et cetera. This is like a brilliant opportunity to achieve that seat at the table, because this whole way of thinking about things works better when we're embedded within functional teams like product innovation or marketing, and we're talking to them on a daily basis, and it's not a kind of one-way back and forth conversation, but a true collaboration. And then finally, test relentlessly. So, you can decide you don't like our report card. You can decide that there's better ways to test, whether it's accuracy or value, but have clear benchmarks, share them in a really transparent way with everyone in the organization, hold vendors that you hire accountable to them, and then just test, 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 test. And every time you add an audience, every time you give birth to, build a digital twin, test, right? Without testing, there's not nearly enough dependability. All right, so I think we have 8 minutes left. I'm gonna stop and tell you that, well, there's gonna be the questions and discussion, I hope, but we're at booth 640, is that right? 620, yeah, that was not my finest moment. So after the talk, please come by and chat. And honestly, even if you're not like a potential client or something, I'm curious what you all think about this stuff, what you've tried internally, what kind of experiments you've tried, and then what you're worried about, like what the barriers to trying a pilot might be. So come by and chat and talk, and let me pause and shut up for a minute now and see if there are questions or thoughts. Okay, there's a lot. So let's go, and then there. Priscilla, I think.
Yeah. So when you have success with HubSpot, you mentioned, and so one of your pieces of advice was get buy-in. Can you tell me why maybe that worked with them?
Yeah.
What do you mean by buy-in, and how did you get it cross-functionally?
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you about a different client because it's a really interesting buy-in story. So one of the world's biggest appliance brands is a client, and their CMO heard about us. That doesn't always happen, right? But she was like, oh, this is really cool. This is what I want because I want more consumer-centric messaging. I want much faster pace of content creation, campaign creation, much faster, tighter kind of learning loop so that we learn from our mistakes and get better over time and so on. And she said, like, hey, head of insights, who's like a pretty senior, experienced insight guy and team, why don't you talk to them and see if the solution makes sense? So he talked to us and he said, I talked to a lot of other platforms and their basic position was, like, I'm useless. Like, you should buy this because we're disrupting you. And he was like, I don't want to be disrupted, actually. I just want to get better at what I do. And I said, well, why do you feel that way? And he said, because they're just handing me these things that they call AI personas, and I don't know what goes into them, and I can't construct them on my own, and I can't build them based on my own data, my own segmentations, my own insights that my blood, sweat, tears, and money have built over the years. And he said, like, how are you guys different? And what I said was, we really believe in governance, management by people who understand research, who understand what makes data good quality data, who understand what it means to have data that includes those kind of like edge cases or less heard voices, all that stuff. And then you democratize access once you're pretty sure that the core of it is good and tested and so on. So I said, this gives you a really important role that we believe in. It wasn't just humoring him, in building these personas, in creating the data ingestion and gathering plan, and then you democratize access to make the CMO happy. And her people can have access to these personas, but it's not just like a bunch of people running around the company asking like a kind of glorified ChatGPT wrapper questions about like how their customers would respond to a new design, and then making decisions about, on that basis. That was horrifying to him. So I think the approach really matters, number one. And number two is, this is not like new news, but work as hard as you can to get excitement and buy-in from somebody who's not an insights professional, and then from somebody who is. And we've seen a lot of interest, actually earlier interest from product innovation people than from marketers in these approaches, although we do marketing stuff as well. I think that there's a real hunger to drive the acceleration of and improvement of the product innovation process, and that this is a really good place to start. But it's a great question, and obviously you have to navigate differently in every organization. And I think there was another one back there, and then we can go here.
So in a scenario where you build a twin that you feel is very reliable and 91% accurate, how do you make sure that that twin is keeping up with culture? So there's a new competitor in the marketplace, or there's some big cultural moment that happens. What do you do to make sure that that's kind of aging along with you?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and there are a few answers. Number one is you want a plan to ingest real data about how people are reacting to that change that you're thinking about, maybe every quarter, 6 months, year, you're kind of refreshing or updating the underlying training data. That's number one. I mean, that's probably obvious. Number two is, even though we're pre-processing all of the data on our side first, and we're going to be using our own sort of fine-tuned LLMs and self-hosted and all that, we are also using commercially available LLMs in a very optimized way. And they are, in a way, constantly updated because of the training data that they're drawing on is updated. And then number three is maybe less obvious, but we've seen over that if you have a digital twin and some big change in the market, whether it's a kind of like endogenous or exogenous thing, due to a new campaign you're running, or Trump getting elected, or whatever it is, then the digital twin learns to handle change more effectively. And the next time there's a change, the change gets modeled more effectively as well. So I'd say it's a combination of those three things. Number one is you can't avoid the need to just gather data on an ongoing basis in a smart way, although maybe less than you did before, or in different formats. Number two is the LLM training data is changing over time, and you have to learn how to kind of draw on it in a way that makes sense. And then number three is you get better at handling change over time, just like almost like a human employee does, right? Oh, you've been through like the introduction of mobile technology into research. Maybe you'll be better at handling the introduction of Gen AI into research. Even though the changes are very different, there's a certain core competency associated with like handling and modeling change. Yeah.
So that was one of my questions, but the second one is looking at the single category sphere when you created a twin. What was the minimum amount of sample
Yeah.
that you modeled it off of, and the amount of ingestion of information or documents?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the billion-dollar question, and it's a good question. And the first thing I'll say is, there's no universal answer, and actually don't believe it if somebody says there is a universal answer, because it depends on the quality of the data, how finely you want to segment the twin, right? In the same way that you might need a larger sample size if you want to segment your data, more with real people. And then you also need to think about the category and the kinds of questions you're asking and so on. But it's sometimes less than you would imagine, right? So in the case of this client where we created this data, I can tell you about that because it's broadly representative. We did a study of 500 teens in UK, and then we ingested one or two additional studies that were smaller scale, and then a few qual transcripts and a couple decks, and we were able to achieve those numbers, in UK, and achieve those numbers not only relative to the stuff that was studied in the past, but totally new innovation concepts that the real people had never been shown before. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, that would be nice to have that much foundational data. But the other way to think about it is a lot of the value comes from just getting all your stuff in one place and being able to analyze it really rigorously in relation to all of the other different sources of data on a columns and rows basis, both quant and qual, and have a conversation with your data. That's really powerful. So you get that no matter how much you throw in. And then the cool thing about a digital twin is the outputs are, if you're doing it right, the outputs are never worse than they are now, right? If you start building it now, and it's a little useful, that's great, because in 6 months or a year, it's going to be incredibly powerful as you add data in a smart way to it. So it's not like one of those, I shouldn't get started until I have enough underlying data at all type things. It's like, let's get started in a cheap and fast and pilot-based way, and then add to the foundation as we're going. And we've seen a lot of clients do that really successfully. So I'm happy to talk about it more. It's a really good question, but there's like no single number I can give you. Anything else? All right. Oh, yeah.
Any questions you would not recommend?
Yeah.
Of digital twins, type of questions or type of
Yeah. It's a really good question. So I would say that there are certain things you don't want to do with digital twins. You probably don't want to test like 2 possible campaigns or 2 possible products and make a decision exclusively based on the outputs of the digital twin. But if you have 20, directionally, it's a great way to narrow down to 3 or 4, right, that you might want to test with people. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, I think with a lot of digital twins, you have to be very careful about the most human kinds of stuff. So like human sensory stuff, emotions, etc. But as I said, that's something that you can kind of overcome if you have the right training data and the right models. And then the last thing I'll say is, whereas it's true, you can pick up outliers. In a lot of cases, the AI does tend to gesture at like broad currents of behavior. So if your job is to find like the 1% of a thing that's happening, like a glint in somebody's eye before your competitor does, you can use these approaches, but it has to just be one of several approaches, right? It's not going to necessarily like reveal automatically that like little outlier that might turn into something big. And there are sometimes trade-offs between statistical accuracy and the nuance of like outlier type speech and emotion. I can send, we did like a whole checklist that's been based on a bunch of different pilots where it's like, okay, if I'm in an organization and I'm thinking, should I use this approach? Like types of questions, et cetera. You know, do I check it or not check it? I'd be happy to share it with you because it's a good question. It's something we think about a lot. All right, any last ones before we close things out? All right, so come to our booth to talk more. And it was funny, like I did a similar talk at Quirk's London, not the same one. And somebody told me I'm now the digital twin guy, which is like mostly horrifying and awful to hear. So I don't know why I just said that again. But please don't think of me as the digital twin guy. There's more to me.